Hello everyone, my name is Sandy Reyes and I'm the Communications Director here at Smart Circle. I am so excited to invite you inside our new ICD owners meeting happening right now in our beautiful headquarters in Newport Beach, California. We have new ICD owners from across the country here today to learn, to network, and really grab the resources and tools that they need to supercharge their business. Plus, we have some of the top consultants here as well, and they'll be answering some of the questions that everyone is asking. Speaking of top performers, in just a short few moments, you'll have a front row seat to my one-on-one sit-down with Ken Weinraub. Ken Weinraub is our highest earning national consultant in our network's 44-year history. He has an amazing story and you're gonna hear it, and he also has some really awesome insights to share. So if you're an inspiring entrepreneur, if you're someone that's in our network, or if you're simply just curious, then this is a meeting you are not going to want to miss. It's about to get started, so let's head inside and see what's going down. Hey, Sean. Hey.
Sandy.
Hey, good to see you.
Nice to see you too.
Yeah, thanks so much for sitting down with me today.
Oh, no problem.
Ken, I am thrilled to have this conversation with you. How's life? How's the family?
Wife's home with kids. She says I make the house worse, actually.
Yeah.
Kids have actually been better behaved without me there.
Aw, I bet they miss you when you come out to these meetings, huh?
No. They just ask, they look up and see a plane in the sky and they say, there's Dad.
Aw.
The only thing I have to do is bring them home keychains.
Oh, from everywhere you travel?
So we had the meeting in Dallas with AT&T on Wednesday and Thursday.
Yeah.
And we've been to Dallas a million times. Mm-hmm. And I've probably bought keychains from the airport like maybe 20 times.
That's so cool.
And every time I get them, I try to get a different one. Probably 80% of them have been thrown out. Yeah. Because and literally their backpacks, when they walk through their school, the teacher made Wyatt take his keychains off the backpack because they were so big that it was like a weapon banging into kids, like when he was walking with his backpack. Like Olivia, when she had all the keychains on, her backpack was so heavy, she tipped over backwards because it was so heavy from keychains. But every time I go to an airport, I have to get them keychains.
I'm surprised there's always new keychains to get.
There's not. So the only thing that was important when I came home from Dallas was, are you getting keychains? And I text Jess, I'm like, you really need me to get keychains? Like I just got keychains in Dallas. And she goes, yeah, you have to bring home keychains.
It's important.
And I bought rubber ones that didn't clang when they hit, because like you hear them walking like from down the hallway.
That's really funny. So are you going to pick up some from the California
I have to get
airport?
John Wayne Airport keychains, so that will be my task.
That's amazing.
Even though the last time I got him keychains.
So what happens when they get over the keychains? So what are you going to do with them?
I don't know what's going to be next. We could probably donate them and they can melt them into something big.
Into one big keychain.
You could probably make this table with the amount of keychains
That's so cool. I love that. I mean, when I remember, Ken, when I visited your office when I was an ICD owner in 2015, I mean, you weren't even married yet. And it's crazy now, 10 years later, this is the first time I've spoken to you since, and you have 5 kids, I believe is the case. 5 kids, you're married. I mean, how's life for you nowadays?
Life is good. I met my wife. She worked at the home improvement company that we were working with. Yeah. So when I was a rep in the field, like we would call in the leads, and she was one of the phone managers for their call center. Mm-hmm. So I would always call the leads in, hey, this is Ken, I'm with Mr. and Mrs. Smith. Yeah. You know, they want a quote on the roof. Yeah. So when their company did a Christmas party at the end of 2007, I got invited to their company Christmas party. Yeah. So my manager took me. They let him bring like one of the leaders in the office. Yeah. So I went, she was 18 years old. I was 23 years old, and I met her at that party. Yeah. And then started dating in like May. Got married in 2016. Yeah. So we got married almost 10 years ago now in Mexico. And then we had our first kid in 2018.
That's incredible.
So now we got 5.
Yeah, what are their ages?
The oldest is 6, the triplets are 4, and then the youngest is 2. We'll be 3 in April.
So needless to say, life is very different than the last time me and you got to talk.
Life is different.
That's so awesome. So Ken, I really wanted to dive in a little bit into your background, but before I do that, I wanted to congratulate you because you've achieved something really exceptional in our industry. You've become the highest earning national consultant in our network's 44-year history. That's really incredible, and that speaks to your hard work and your dedication, but to me, it's also not just a personal win. You know, I know firsthand that to achieve that level of success in this industry, you have to help a lot of people. And you're someone that has been a leader for so many years, and you've helped impact so many lives. Did you ever envision that your career would have such an impact on other people?
I probably did not envision that this is what I was going to do. And even prior to starting in this industry, I wasn't even thinking about owning a business. I wasn't thinking entrepreneurial.
Yeah.
You know, really, if you would have given me an opportunity coming out of school that, you know, paid me $45,000 a year, I would have thought I was making the most money I could possibly make. And if they threw a company car on it, you know, I was like, wow, this is great.
Good stuff, yeah.
And one of the first interviews that I went on was with Canon, the photocopy company. And I went on the interview, and you know, they did their thing. And, I didn't get the position, and I called back and asked, like, hey, how come I didn't get offered the job? And they're like, you didn't seem excited about the job. I'm like, the job was going to businesses, training them how to use fax machines. I'm like, who would be excited about that? And they're like, well, there'd be a lot of people who'd be excited about taking it, and it was like $13 an hour. So they were talking about how much the $13 an hour was. So yeah, I never would have thought this.
Obviously, it's their loss. Who knows? Maybe you would have been a consultant for printers or fax machines somewhere.
Possibly. That would have been great.
That's awesome. I mean, you touched a little bit on it in terms of before you started in this industry, and I'd love to kind of start there. If you could share a little bit about your early days, maybe where you went to school, what you studied. I mean, how did you end up getting into the sales industry?
Well, I went to school in northern New Jersey at Montclair State, studied political science with a minor in sociology. When I originally got out of school, I thought I was going to do something possibly in like law enforcement or government work. I applied to a bunch of different parts of the government and didn't hear back from anybody, didn't get offered any positions, and it really derailed my plans of what I thought I was going to do. And you know, I must have applied to hundreds of different positions at, you know, Major League Baseball and the NFL and, you know, ticket sales and all these things, and I didn't really hear back from anybody. And then I got into financial advising for a little bit. It was definitely not my strength. I was not good over the phone selling. And really what turned me off about doing it was that after, you know, you did your test there and you studied for your licensing, you know, you got an opportunity to meet the highest earners that were working there. And the last person I met for the day was an older gentleman, and you know, he was the highest earner there, highest earner at the branch. And I came home that night and my father was like, how was work today? I'm like, it was terrible. And he goes, what was terrible? I was like, well, I met the guy making the most money. And I'm like, he's so old. And he was like, what do you think? You think you're just gonna make all this money like coming right into a job? And I'm like, I don't wanna be that old still having to put in the same work that that guy was putting in. So he goes, you know, your generation, you think you're just going to make all this money early on and, you know, all this stuff. And I said, hey, great speech, but I'm still not doing it. And I came in the next day and left. And then I worked at, when I was in college, I worked at a golf course. So I was a golf cart attendant. And I would fill the water jugs up on the golf course. So for 4 years of school, I did that. And that's what I was doing before I started in the business. I was driving the ball machine on the driving range, getting whacked with driving range balls. And every time that cart gets hit with a driving range ball, it would scare the shit out of me. I would jump up. I would literally jump up like through the roof of the golf cart machine. And all I would be thinking about is like, does anybody on the driving range see how high I must be getting out of the seat when every time the ball would hit the thing? It was so loud. And now every time I go to a driving range, I'm very sympathetic. Because you see everybody, they're like trying to hit the person picking up the golf balls. And I go away from him, I'm like, the guy's probably scared in there, just like I was.
Well, you were a college kid, but that was probably fun, a cool, fun job for you during college.
I did a lot of pull-ups in the golf cart barn. So I would do a lot of pull-ups, and sat down in the barn and would spray the golf carts out when people would bring them back.
Yeah.
And it was 8 hours a day, and I worked on the weekends. I don't play golf, so I never really played golf at the golf course, but yeah, that's what I did.
So, I mean, were there any entrepreneurs in your family? No. I mean, tell me about like the day you decided to apply for a sales job.
Well, I needed a job. I needed to make money. I had $50 left to my name. And I needed to do something.
Yeah.
And I wasn't, again, my career of what I thought I was going to do got derailed a little bit. And, I was looking for an opportunity. But even when I came in, I was very employee minded. If the day started at 10 o'clock, I was in at 10 o'clock. Yeah. And I would see people show up early. I would see people getting there early for breakfast. I would see people, doing all that stuff. And I would look at them like, what are they doing? Like the day starts at 9 o'clock or 10 o'clock. Like, why are they showing up so early? Yeah. And then when we would get back to the office at night, again, guys would stay late, and I would, if the day was done at 8 o'clock, I was out of there at 8 o'clock. Drive home, eat my dinner, and that was it. Yeah. But once I started seeing people in the office, when I saw them start their own company, a light bulb went off to where it was like I wanted to be in that position, and that's what I had to learn. So I started associating with those people. Yeah. And I went to them and said, hey, I got to hang around you more. I want to be in your car rides more. I started showing up early. Yeah. I started staying late, and I let what they were doing rub off on me. Yeah. And I think most importantly, I gave them the permission to call me out on things that I was probably doing that were more, employee, type decisions instead of thinking like a leader or thinking like an entrepreneur. Yeah. And by associating with them, it rubbed off on me.
That's great. So were you good at the sales when you first got started, or was that something you really had to learn to get good at?
I was not good at it. And it was not, kind of like what I said with selling over the phone. Yes. It definitely was not natural for me. The first experience I had in the field, I was with my leader, and I actually got sick at a customer's door because I was so nervous. And I remember walking up to the door and, faintly knocking on it, and he was like, you got to knock harder. And I'm like, I did. And I was like, nobody's home. And he goes, I hear somebody moving. It's probably the cat, let's just go. And a kid came to the door and said, can I help you? And all I got out was my name. And then I got sick all over his front steps, and that was my first day. And I turned around and looked at my leader and said, like, wow. What do I do next? And he said, the only rule you have for the rest of the day is just don't talk to anybody. Yeah. So nobody. He said nobody. I said, what if the male person's walking by? And he goes, don't talk to anybody. So literally the rest of the day I was just following him and asking him questions and stuff like that. And I remember getting back to the office at night, and the manager, and he went to our manager and was like, hey, Ken's a good guy, but total project. And I'm like, man, that doesn't, am I a project? Yeah. And I remember coming home that weekend and spending all day Sunday, practice pitching with my parents and walking up and down my driveway. I don't know how many hours I put in doing it. Yeah. And I was so excited to come into the office the next morning. I was like looking for anybody to practice pitch with me. Of course. Because I spent all day Sunday practicing the pitch, and it got better. Yeah. And it slowly got better, but I think I was very focused on all those little things. I needed all the hours in the field that I can get. I needed every conversation, getting in and out of every, conversation in appropriate time. Couldn't waste time with unqualified people. And I think it actually became one of my bigger strengths once building my team. Because people need to get taught all those little things. People that come into the business and they're very talented at sales, they're not always the most successful because they can't teach other people how to do it. Exactly. They're great at sales, but they're not teaching. Yeah. And when somebody's out in the field with somebody that is doing all those little things, how they stand at the door, how they wave, how they smile, that gets transferred to the new starts and people much more frequently than somebody who's just great at sales.
Right. And I think most people would probably quit and not come back if that was like their first field experience. My
mother was not excited. When I came home, she was, how was work today? I'm like, it was good. And she was like, how'd you do? She's like, did you sell anything? Yeah. I'm like, I got sick. And she was like, you got sick? I'm like, it was hot. It was like, so maybe it was the heat. Yeah. She was like, Ken, your first day of work, you're getting sick. Like, do you really think this is the industry that you should be doing.
Yeah.
And I'm like, just give it some time.
Right.
You know, I just give me some time with it.
Yeah.
You know, let me learn and just give me some time.
And so, I mean, what made you want to come back then? What was in your brain that was like, no, I need to like actually figure this out?
Well, I saw people that were making money. I saw people, I looked at my manager that, you know, the office at the time was doing, you know, certificates, and you know, they were selling X amount of certificates. He was making X amount of dollars off each one of those certificates. And I said, if this guy can do it, I can do it. I just got to figure out, you know, who to associate with, who to learn from, and who to get with. And you know, I gave it time and was patient with myself, but by associating with people that were making the money, and it's not like I looked at those people and said that, you know, oh, this person's just better than me. And you know, I looked at them and said, I can do what they're doing. I have to learn it, and I got to be patient with myself, and I got to be a student.
I love that message, because I think so often people think to do well in sales, like you have to be naturally talented and you have to be extroverted, and even, you know, 15 some years later, like you're still very even keel, and I think most people would say you're probably a little bit more of an introvert, and you've had like the most success in our sales industry. What is your advice then for someone who maybe sees people that are a little bit more naturally talented at sales, or maybe a little bit more outgoing, and they think they have to be like that to succeed here?
I think people have to be confident in their own skin and their own abilities and what their strengths are. And you know, you can learn from other people. You can, you know, go hang out with people that are, you know, maybe more charismatic and stuff like that, but you have to be confident in who you are, and let it be natural. Like, this is who I am. And you're probably right, to where I'm definitely more of like an introvert than I am somebody that's going to be the life of the party.
Yeah, definitely. So would you say then you were financially driven on the front end?
That's a good question. Was I financially driven on the front end? I never would have thought in a million years that this would be, it's still surreal to me now, of like, this is what it was 18 years ago, to thinking about, you know, what it is now and the financial side of it. I think the best thing for me is seeing, you know, all these other people now, you know, be so successful, and all these other people that are able to do things for their family, and, you know, trips that they're able to go on, or cars that they're able to buy, and even the money that they're able to save and, you know, put away. You know, it's just as important as, you know, some of the things that maybe are important to them in their life that they want to buy. But hey, I'm also, you know, putting this money away, because, you know, a year ago they were a rep in the field, and now they're making, you know, $500,000, or 2 years ago they were in the field building their crew, and now they're making over $1 million. And the amount of $1 million earners, the amount of $500,000 earners, you know, people that have earned captainships, RC, NC, it's amazing to watch. And I think that's more motivating to me than anything that, you know, I've been able to, you know, make.
So I guess what drives you has really changed over the years.
For sure, and you know, both in the business and I think also personally. You know, kind of like what you said in the beginning, to where my life has changed so much, and now, you know, raising kids, and, you know, being a parent, and, you know, being an example for them, and things that you want to do for them. You know, I've grown up in the business.
That's so cool. I want to talk about the fact that some people say that those in our industry are brainwashed, because we really truly believe that anyone can learn how to start their own company, manage teams, and really become successful in this industry. But the reality is it takes an immense amount of hard work. It takes a lot of sacrifices and dedication, and being a good student, like you said earlier. And also the timing has to be right? How hard would you say it truly is to succeed as an ICD owner in this industry?
Well, it's definitely hard, but you have so many people that you can learn from, so much sharing of information that happens today. And even if you think about, you know, 5 or 6 years ago, to where, you know, if this was one person's organization, you know, they did their thing with their organization. Or if this was one person's program or campaign that they were on, you know, they did their thing with that campaign. What's changed a lot in the last, you know, few years is the amount of sharing of information that happens cross programs, cross organizations, you know, even coming out of COVID, to where, you know, we were learning from somebody on the retail side about how prevalent books became, with how they developed people, and reading books every single month, and trips that they went on together. And you saw that sharing of information happen across, you know, everybody, to where now more people in our industry are reading, they're networking, they're visiting offices. It doesn't really matter where somebody came from, and it doesn't really matter like what campaign somebody's on. They're sharing best practices.
Yeah.
And I think the other thing that's really benefited our industry right now is what the clients are giving us. And if you look at the consumer offer, like now our reps in the field, it's not only to the fact that they have an offer that's in line with what somebody can get if they signed up on their own. We have better offers.
Yeah.
So they're giving us offers that are exclusive to our rep that's out in the field, that's either visiting them in their business or visiting them at their home, which has made the experience that a rep has, much different than what it was 10 years ago, and for sure much different than it was 15, 18 years ago.
Yeah, and I know for sure they're making a lot more money today than they were 10 years ago.
Yeah, the rep in the field is, making record amount of money. You see people coming in that in their first couple of weeks, they could be making $1,500, $2,000 a week.
Amazing.
There's every week that we're meeting somebody that's making $5,000 in the field.
Wow. That was unheard of when I first started as an ICD owner in 2012. So.
We'd be excited about a manager making that in 2012.
100%.
You'd be looking at them saying, what are you doing? That's so special.
Right.
And what's cool now is that you look at an average office that maybe they're managing 12 or 15 people.
That the sales rep who is making $1,500 per week could be bringing in close to $3,000 in revenue for the ICD they work for.
And if they can manage 15 people, 20 people, you do the math of what some of these offices are making.
So all these advantages and benefits are wonderful and they're great, but does that guarantee that every ICD owner is going to succeed?
It's still hard. Somebody has to have, confidence in themselves. They have to have leadership abilities. They have to be a good communicator. You see it now, how fast people are answering emails, being accessible. It's still hard, and they still put in a lot of work. So, it's definitely a commitment level.
Yeah. And I mean, I think running any sort of business is really hard. And when you think of like the businesses here, just in our country, I mean, nearly half of them fail in the first 5 years. So what are maybe the advantages of someone starting their own company within our network versus going out and doing it on their own?
Well, I think the big advantage is that you have support from so many different people that were in the same position that you were in, or whatever challenge you're going through right now. Somebody went through that same challenge 6 months ago, and you have the opportunity to learn from them, learn from their mistakes, learn from what they did well, and spend as much time as you need in the office, and then even look at how much Zoom has changed to where now you can get that face-to-face interaction on Zoom right away. So, and it helps these guys tremendously. To where that there's so many people that you can look to and go visit, go learn from, copy, spend a month in their building, and then go back and fix whatever you have to fix.
Yeah, no, you're definitely right. I mean, I can attest to that. When I was an ICD owner in 2015 and thinking about picking up a different campaign, I visited your office, and you were a national consultant, you were still in your office, you were still running it, and I just remember thinking like, this is so cool. This guy's like super successful, and he's so willing to just help me out and share information and really help take my business to the next level. So,
and now you see that, I think, more than ever, to where you have so many examples, you have so many people that are performing at a high level. There's we're here at the new owners meeting, and you have somebody up there, Luna, who started her own business 11 weeks ago.
She was in the field for 9 months on AT&T B2B, learning as a sales rep. She started her own business about 11 weeks ago and has already saved close to $100,000.
Everybody has gone to her office to go visit, and I was speaking with somebody last night, and I asked him, I said, what changed? And he goes, I went to Luna's office with my team for the last 2 weeks, and now you see we've doubled in production, we've doubled in headcount, in a short amount of time.
Yeah, that's incredible. I do want to touch on the other part that I think is a huge benefit to starting a company within our network is the opportunity to work with such big clients. Could you elaborate on that?
I think that even if somebody was starting their own business, you would have to find a client to work with, and by being inside this network, you have access to some of the biggest companies in the world. I mean, you look at a company like AT&T, a Fortune 500, I think they're 32nd biggest company in the United States. You get to work with companies like Verizon. You get to work with companies like Frontier. You know, these are the biggest in the industry. And they're giving us, you know, the best offers, and they're giving us the best compensation.
It's wonderful. And now you don't only consult with ICD owners, you also consult with Smart Circle on the clients. You've been in a lot of big meetings with some of these clients. So what's that been like for you? What are you learning as you're sitting in these meetings with these Fortune 50 clients?
Well, the biggest thing that I take away from the meetings is how important face-to-face is for them, and how much they depend on the growth of our industry to support what their goals are for their business. And when we leave those meetings, we know that us growing 5 times or 10 times over the course of the next 2 to 3 years is the only way that they're going to achieve what their goals are for growth. And it's pretty cool to think about, like, the rep in the field, how important they are. But it's not just the rep in the field that's important. The rep's ability to build other people that are as good or better than them. And even when they look at the reps that are in the field right now, they're not looking at it saying, hey, we need to keep this person selling for the next year or 2 years. They're looking at it saying, how much longer until that person is owning their own business? How much longer until that person is going to be able to manage 10 or 15 people? Because that's where they become meaningful, to where now they're managing 10 or 15 people and they're doing X amount of, you know, sales out of their office, not, you know, hey, this person did, you know, 10 sales last week, and now they're so important. And they want you to work your way up. And they're looking at it saying, how do we make that as easy as possible? How do we give the rep, how do we give them as many tools to allow them to be successful? Not just from a compensation, not just from an offer perspective, but even from a systems perspective. How do we make the system in the field that the rep is using to allow them to achieve the most success in as short amount of time as possible?
That's great. Their appetite for us is really large. So you have a lot of big shoes to fill this next year.
They brought a lot of reps to the Super Bowl, you know, a couple weeks ago. You know, they brought them to concerts and dinners and, you know, all these things, and, you know, the guys loved it.
That's awesome. So we obviously talked about how your life has changed over the years, and on the front end, I'm sure you sacrificed a lot, and a lot of your time was being given to the business, being given to you building your business. How is your work-life balance now? I mean, is it still all work and no play?
Well, you know, now, even for me, 18 years in the industry, you know, my life is much different personally than it was, you know, 18 years ago, 10 years ago, even 5 years ago. You know, 5 years ago we had, you know, 1 kid, and now we have 5 kids at home. You know, they're all growing up. You know, we're able to take them on trips. We're able to, you know, take them places on, you know, for spring break, you know, and they also come to, you know, our events. So they come to R&R weekend and, you know, get to be a part of all that. And I think it's important too, because now, you know, at 41 years old, you know, the time that I gave up in my earlier years in the business, time is more important to me now in terms of what I'm able to do, because I do want to spend time with them and I do want to watch them grow up and I want to be involved in that. And to be able to have a role in that and to be able to be accessible to them because I put the work in for those first 15 years, I think is important. And that's where I think sometimes, especially owners in their early years, you know, they look at the time that they have, they run their own business, they can do, you know, what they want to do. So if they look at it and say, hey, this Friday afternoon, you know, I got this going on, so I'm going to go do it, and they think they're gaining that time when it's really not as important. And I was fortunate enough to where I had examples in the industry and relationships in the industry that I knew how important it was, you know, to put the time in early on so you can get it back later on. And it was either pay now or pay later, and I chose pay now so I can get it, you know, in my later years.
Yeah, incredible. How did it feel to make your first million?
How did it feel to make my first million? I don't think anything changed. I mean, I don't even think I looked at it.
Did you make any large purchases? Like, what's the first big thing that you?
If I could go back to my younger self, and look at what was important, when I started making money, it would probably be to be a better saver. And some of the things that I thought were important earlier on, now again with kids, you know, what school they go to is the most important. How safe they are is the most important. You know, the things that they're able to get for their life, those are most important. So what car I had or what house I had, you know, because my wife and I built a house. and we started building it a handful of years ago. And some of the stuff we put into the house that at the time, before any children, it was so important. Right. And I'm like, we need this. You know, we needed a gym in the basement, or, you know, everybody always talks about the bowling alley.
The bowling alley, yes.
And in a weird way, the bowling alley was so important to me.
Yeah.
And I don't even like bowling. So, but it was so important to me. And now with the bowling alley, with the gym, it's not as important. Yeah. You know, the kids use it, they enjoy it, they're able to go downstairs and, you know, have a birthday party in the basement, which is great, but it's not important.
Yeah, makes sense. So you might have thought that that was the $1 million question, but it's actually this one. Does money buy happiness?
Does money buy happiness? I don't think it buys happiness. And even if somebody is making a lot of money, but they don't enjoy what they're doing every day, you know, they're making a lot of money, but they're miserable. Like, I am making more money than I ever thought I would make in my life. Yeah. And I enjoy every single day. Mm-hmm. You know, prior to this meeting started, one of the owners that I consult with, you know, sent me an email that, you know, that a year ago at R&R weekend, he had 10 people going with him to R&R. And he brought 10, that was his whole business, that was his whole world. 7 out of those 10 became business owners themselves. And now you fast forward 1 year later, he's now gonna become a regional consultant within 1 year. So to look at how much his life has changed in 1 year, and just to think 2 years ago, he was a rep in the field, dealing with rejection, dealing with no's, building, gaining, losing a crew. And now 2 years later, his whole life has changed, and just starting to change. Yeah. You know, if he's making $16,000 a month in just overrides, like, he's at the beginning of what he's building. And in 2-3 years from now, he'll be somebody that's making over $1 million a year.
Yeah, that's incredible. I think the last question I want to leave you with is, what do you hope your kids to learn from you as they get older and as they get into their careers? What do you hope that they take away from your experience and the life that you've been able to give to them?
If my wife watches this interview, she's gonna get mad. Yeah. So Jess, don't watch. Yeah.
Jess, please watch.
So I, even like for them, like one of our sons, he shows leadership skills more than the other kids. And I have no clue, like when I was younger, if, you know, I was getting taught leadership skills and stuff like that. Of course, I was watching my parents work. I was watching time that they sacrificed and, you know, things that they did to provide as much as possible for, you know, our family. And, you know, now raising our kids, like, I noticed that, you know, Landon will open the door for his sister. He'll make sure that when she steps somewhere that, you know, he's holding her hand. And I'll always look at Jess and say, hey, look at Landon. He's showing natural leadership skills. Yeah. And not that the other ones, you know, won't grow as leaders and stuff like that, but I do notice that he's, you know, showing leadership skills. And it's funny because when I was in college, the coach for Rutgers men's basketball came to one of my classes. And I remember I asked him at class, I said, you know, when you elect somebody to be a captain of the basketball team, like, what are you looking for? And he said, I'm looking for the player that's willing to give their shirt off their back to somebody else. And I'll never forget it, that year of lacrosse, we would always have like our warm-up outfits. And I remember we were going to play a game, and one of the freshmen on the team, he forgot his warm-up. So he came to me and said, hey, I forgot my warm-up. You know, I'm going to get in trouble. So I gave him my warm-up, and I gave him my, you know, track pants and the whatever the jacket was, and he's running around so that I didn't have my warm-up on. And our coach was like, Ken, where's your warm-up? And like, oh, I forgot it. Now, it had our number on the back. Oh. So, and the coach knew my number. Yeah. But he was, you know, he was reprimanding me in front of the team, and the freshman knew he was wearing mine, and I took it and said, you know, hey, I forgot, blah, blah, blah. We had to run sprints, blah, blah, and I took it. And all I was thinking about was that coach that came to our class. I'm like, wow, this was my opportunity to give the shirt off my back to somebody else. But my relationship with the freshmen on the team, the sophomores on the team, you know, for the next 2 years that I played lacrosse, you know, they always remembered, you know, hey, you gave your warm-up to the freshmen, and I took the heat. But it was a leadership lesson, and I was looking to grow as a leader. And in the 18 years that I've been in this business, the examples that you have, the people that you get to network with, junior, senior in the business, even coming out of COVID. Like, I learned more from some of these guys that became involved in some of the programs that I was fortunate enough to be involved with that, 5 years ago had nothing to do with me. And I learned more from them than they were learning from me. They changed my life. Yeah. Being able to learn from their example, learn from their leadership skills, learn from things that they were doing well in their business. And I've been able to grow as a leader by associating with. They could have been 4 years into the business. They could have been 6 months into the business.
Yeah.
And they were better, and I got a chance to learn from them.
Amazing. That's really wonderful. I mean, if that was your character back in college, it doesn't surprise me that you've had all this success so many years later. So congratulations.
I appreciate it, Sandy.
Yeah. When are you flying back?
Fly back tonight. Oh,
hey,
look,
what's up, guys?
It's Richard Anderson.
How are you guys?
Richard Anderson, another national consultant in our network.
Well, there's a bunch of people upstairs. We're going to go to lunch.
Sounds great.
Let's do it. Yeah. All right. Thanks so much.
I appreciate it, Sandy.
I appreciate you. We'll see you guys upstairs. Hey guys, I hope you enjoyed that interview with Ken. I just heard we have 5 national consultants upstairs. Let's go find them and ask them some questions.